Okay. All right. Shalom, shalom, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I have a husband and wife. They've actually been subscribers for mine for a while. Heather and her husband live out in Ohio, and she has an absolutely just, it's a mind-boggling, very tragic and heartbreaking story about her experience with CPS. I'm going to let her start off by giving her an introduction of how she and her husband met and their background, and then we're going to go into the actual events of what occurred when they dealt with CPS in Ohio. So Heather, without further ado, go ahead.
Okay, so 2009, me and my husband had met. I was on heroin battling my addictions with the opiate crisis, so they call it now. And he had already started dealing with his issues and ultimately ended up helping me get off the heroin. And 3 months later, after we had gotten engaged very quickly, we found out I was pregnant, and everything was good. I didn't have any issues with the battling of my addiction at that point. And 3 years later, we had moved out to the part of town closest to his family. And he had some child support issues that he had to go to jail for 90 days. And we had made the decision back then I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. And so he's doing his 90 days. His family, his friends, everybody that said they would help me turn their back. Well, I didn't have a car, no way to get to the doctor and do what I needed to do. And things got rough the last 2 weeks. And when he came home, we dealt with that. And 3 days later, CPS is knocking at the door, and we have no idea why. Well, I didn't contact them because I knew I did not have to. Just because they knock, that doesn't mean that you call them back or, you know, meet with their criteria. So I left it alone. Well, 3 days later, he had an issue with his heart, and it was at 9. He went to the hospital. His whole family went, and they were going to release him. And 5 minutes before they were going to, the doctor came out and told his family, and they all left him. So I had a babysitter come to the house, sit with the kids. This was late at night. They were in bed. You know, I'm not going to wake them up at 3 in the morning to take a 20-minute drive. So I had my neighbor come and sit with them. And in the 20 minutes it should have taken, cops are beating on my door, kicking in my door, telling my babysitter to leave, and CPS is taking my kids all within an hour's time. And a week later, I go for my first visit with my kids, who were, by the way, at the time it was only two, my two boys, 17 months old and 6 months old. And first visit, I'm changing my oldest son's diaper, and he was very obviously violated in the worst way possible. I couldn't imagine what was going through his head at the time. So that started our battle with CPS. It was very long and grueling, and if you want to ask questions to get into the details, Daniel, we can do it that way.
Yeah, so this is just unbelievable. It's just heartbreaking. So my first question is this: Did the police ever say why, when you had a babysitter there, you went to the hospital just to pick up your husband real quickly, why they all of a sudden beat down your door and took your kids from you?
His cousin's wife, who they lived 2 doors down from us, she was at the hospital. She left. And she was watching the house because she knew I would have to leave and get him. Well, the way our houses were positioned, she couldn't see that our neighbor had come in to sit with the kids. So I guess she assumed my kids were by themselves. And so the cops kicked in my door. And I guess it kind of backfired on them when they come in and see that somebody is there with the kids. That's the only.
So then they told the babysitter to leave, though, at that
Yeah.
point.
And well, they were asking her questions, and she said, "It's not a problem. I'm here with these kids. You guys can leave." And they said, "No, we need you to leave. We've got this under control. We're getting her back here now talking about me." Connor, baby, I'm doing an interview.
Unbelievable. So, guys, just so you know, CPS, working in conjunction with law enforcement agencies, they actually get money. They get paid for every child that they can take from a home and put into a foster care system. That's literally how this works. So they are motivated by money. I remember dealing with a CPS worker out in Oregon when I was dealing with my whole situation with my ex-wife and my children, and
Right.
he openly said, yeah, they get paid subsidies for every child that they take out. And so here they do, they break in, they take her children out. Now, a week later, when she's finally able to see her children in this foster home, there's brutal sexual molestation on his 17-month-old. So
Yeah.
when you saw this brutal abuse on your 70-month-old, I want you to describe what happened at that point.
So I'm trying to change his diaper, and he's fighting me. And we're talking about a kid who, if he needed his diaper changed, you knew, because he laid down and was ready to get his diaper changed. It wasn't me checking to see if he needed it. He was letting me know. Well, he obviously had a very full, very saggy diaper. And so I'm like trying to lay him down to change it, and he's fighting me. So when I finally get him calm enough to get his diaper changed, I go and I open the diaper, and it's like suction marks all over his pelvic area. And when I lifted him up to put the dry diaper under him, he was tore apart. And this poor baby, I'm sorry, this part kills me. Because after that, and I'm going crazy and I'm going nuts in the CPS agency and telling them I'm calling the cops and everything. All I could think was, this baby was yelling for me, and I couldn't be there to help him, and he's never been away from me, and the first time he is, this is what happened. It's very hard for me to deal with, not being there for one of my kids.
So then this absolutely horrible CPS agency, they wind up taking your kids out of this foster family and placing them with another one, correct?
Yes. And she was great. The next foster home, she was wonderful. We talked about what had happened, and she knew, because they tried to say that we did that to him. How is that possible? We're on camera, and you people are seeing everything that's going on. If we were doing something to our kids, why wouldn't you come in and stop it? That's number one on the list. Why wouldn't you stop it if we were doing it? We had an hour's time with them. How is that possible? So she knew they were full of it. And she would let us come and visit the kids at her house, and we would meet in public areas. And she was the best foster home that we had. And I actually felt hope that they were coming home when she was having to take care of them. And then they took them out of there. I don't even know the next place they were at, because they were there for a week. And I'm sorry, my son's walking me around the house, guys. So a week later, a week after they're with the third home, they go to the last and final home. And she, come to find out, was friends with the supervisor of the caseworker. And she made it known that she was friends with her, and she told them to get certified to be foster parents because they wanted to adopt. That didn't sit easy with me. So after I'm fighting the downhill battle, because I called him out in court for letting my son be violated, and then I find out that she was wanting to adopt and her friend was the supervisor. I knew that at that point she was fighting me for my kids. It wasn't about her being their foster mom. She wanted my kids. So, and then I had my daughter in the middle of all of this. They had no reason to take her. And I'm at the hospital having her, and I couldn't even get attached because I knew they were going to do it. So I never got to have a relationship with our only daughter together. And then she was 6 months old when everything was said and done. They just said, okay, this is it. She's adopting them. It's been too long.
So basically, because you had a busybody family member who thought that your house was empty,
Yeah.
he called the police. And by the way, this happens so many times, guys, where an anonymous caller, someone will give a tip to the CPS agency, and the CPS says, ooh, now we can go get some kids. So they sent the police to her house, raided their house, took these kids. Kids are then violated immediately within a week of being in this other foster family. Rather than giving their kids back to her, which they should have done, now they put them in another foster home, which was actually a hopeful one that she thought, okay, this is a good foster family. Hopefully I'll be able to get my kids back soon. But no, instead they take them out of that one after a week and start. So this has all occurred in 2012. So from 2012 till now in 2018, can you kind of give us an update of what's happening with your children now?
They were officially adopted by them. I was keeping tabs for the longest time. I was able to, know where they were living at, had they moved, which one time in between then and now they did move. I could get pictures of my kids off of her Facebook page and everything. And then it all got deleted. And everything about them is erased off the internet. So I don't even know if they're living up here or if they are in Florida, because I know, okay, Connor, that they had a vacation home down there. So it's very plausible for them to have moved down there. But the thing is not being able to find anything out about it. So I used to drive by their house and catch glimpses of them all the time because that was all I had. But can't even do that now.
How many children do you and your husband have now that are with you?
We have one together that's with us, and then I was 16 when I had my oldest, so I have her still too.
Okay, so you have your oldest, and then you have a looks like a young one there. So guys, she has her children. Okay, CPS isn't knocking on her door saying, "Oh, you're a horrible parent." So this whole thing about how they raided her house in 2012 and took her little babies from her, this is absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
This is not just happening in Ohio. This is happening all across these United States. And we have got to rise up against this. CPS needs to be completely and totally disbanded, just like the CIA. It is maybe once long ago, several decades ago, maybe it was helping to actually protect children. No longer. It
Not
is
anymore.
It is out to target legitimate, pure families, and literally, whether they do it intentionally or whether they're just careless because all they want is their subsidies and their money, it doesn't matter. The effect is the same. These children are getting brutally molested and raped in the foster care system, in the adoptive care system. Now, I'm not saying it happens every time, okay? But it happens enough. Even if it happened once, it's enough to say, whoa, this whole system and setup is not working. It's not working at all. It's just absolutely heartbreaking how this has happened. So I want you, Michelle, or excuse me, Heather. I apologize. I didn't mean to call you Michelle. I've been dealing with.
Okay.
But Michelle's actually a lady on our prayer team who's been helping with. In fact, I might want to put her in touch with you. She specifically works with people in terms of praying with them and deliverance. I know you've already had deliverance, but she might just be a good person that you want to talk to and get prayer with. But what I was going to ask you, Heather, is what do you have any advice or words or anything for people who might be going through this situation, or at least afraid that maybe a family member or something might rat them out because of who knows why, and how to deal with this whole situation?
Okay, so birth certificates are not mandatory. That's where I'm going to start with this. If they force you to sign a birth certificate at the hospital, the first thing you need to do by the time your child is 7 years old, and probably immediately as soon as you get out of the hospital. You need to get a copy of that birth certificate. You need to sign it, and you need to send it to your Secretary of State. And that way, when they authenticate that birth certificate with your signature, wet ink signature on that birth certificate, you're claiming ownership of that child, and they're no longer a ward of the state. Because even though that child comes home with you, by getting a birth certificate and a social security number, they become a ward of the state. That's where all of the problems come into play. And this is where the Fed comes into play on all of this too. But as long as you claim ownership of that child, the government has no rights to come in for anything.
Okay, very good. I've heard about that before. It was quite a long time ago when I did, but I've heard about that before, about how even like the marriage license basically makes your marriage a ward of the state. What's interesting, guys, is if we go back to colonial America, they did not get licenses for marriages. They did not get licenses for births. None of these licenses or certificates are required in colonial America under the Constitution. These have been things that have been mechanisms that have been used to control us through what we have right now is an admiralty maritime judicial system, not a common law system, which we should have a common law rooted in the Constitution, or the Constitution is rooted in the common law. We should have a more constitutional mode of government, but instead we have this maritime admiralty law, which requires all these certificates and licenses and all these things that unfortunately has just gotten worse and worse and worse as time goes on. And now we see when we give that much power and authority to our government to rule our lives, they always misuse it. And our founding fathers understood this. They knew that. This is why in colonial America, none of this nonsense was going on. So yeah, we absolutely need this total judicial reform. But I hope President Trump is, I believe he is leading us toward.
I think he's actually working towards getting all of this stopped. He's well aware of all of this. He's a very intelligent man. We know that. And there's been rumors that he's actually trying to get rid of the Fed and turn everything back to the Treasury. So if that happens, all of this licensing to drive your car and get married and just have a child will stop. You know, I mean, the Fed is the root of all the evil here, because they're putting $150,000 on each child's head and turning all of us into commodities. The fine print is very important. People don't get it. I didn't until after all this was said and done.
That's absolutely true. In fact, guys, if you want to go to the scripture, it says the love of money is the root of all evil. So it's not money that's evil, but it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And this is what the Federal Reserve has done. All the banking cabals, they have a love for money, a greed, an insatiable greed, coupled with their satanic pedophile wickedness that drives them in their lust for power. And this is what's been causing so many of our problems. And if we were actually to go back to an actual colonial constitutional framework that our founding fathers originally intended, it would cut down on quite a bit of the bloated government, and a lot of people would suddenly find that they don't have their bloated government help. But you know what? That's where we believers come in, helping, showing compassion. That's where there would be so much freedom and prosperity released if all this stuff was removed, that people wouldn't be in these positions where they have to be on food stamps and they have to be on the dole and they have to be on, and all this other nonsense that's going on. It's just these wicked people in our government and in the cabals have conditioned us to believe, we have to have these safety nets. Well, no, we don't. No, we don't. And I agree. I think President Trump definitely does understand this. If my subscribers want to help you and your husband out, just in terms of helping you guys out in whatever way, is there a way that they can reach out to you?
There's I have a YouTube channel.
Okay.
It's by my name, Heather Michelle. That's the channel name. They can reach out that way, send me a message, or my email is Heather Michelle, MICHELLE 4585 @gmail.com. And if they want to reach out that way, we can start there.
I'll just put your email address right at the very top in the description box
Yep.
below the video. Guys, this is just an absolutely heartbreaking story, and I guarantee you what Heather and her husband have gone through. This is just one among literally millions of people that have been going through this. It's a system that's got to be stopped. Heather, do you have anything else that you'd like to share about the situation at all?
Currently, no, but I think my story goes to show that just because CPS is involved with somebody, it's not because they're a bad person or because they did anything wrong. Obviously, I had my oldest through all of it, and then I gave birth to my youngest after it was said and done, and never had any issues with them. So it's about the money, period. And people need to keep that in mind when they get these grudges or vendettas against someone and decide, oh, well, I'm going to call CPS on you. Let's not use them as a weapon. The kids should not be weaponized. That's the biggest takeaway from all of this.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Children should never be weaponized. That's what the judge did to me in Oregon, where she basically said, unless you agree to stop teaching your children about the Bible and scriptures and my particular messianic version of it, then I'm not going to let you see your kids at all. And that's exactly what she did. People to this day say, well, Daniel, come on. No judge is going to do that. You go to Clackamas County, you look up the record, it's all there. That's exactly what she said. And I haven't seen my kids for many, many years because of her decision to do that. And, and I still, every week, I write a letter to her every week, telling her about this. So guys, they have far too much power. It's way beyond the Constitution. They're destroying families, whether it's intentional or not. Many times I do think it's intentional. Many times I think it's because they're so filled with Satan that they literally believe that what they're doing is right. They really think that, and when some things like this happen, they say, oh, well, okay, that was a mistake or whatever. They don't even realize the full gravity of what they're doing.
Right.
It's unbelievable. Well, Heather, thank you so much. I know this was a very emotional and heartbreaking story for you to talk about, but I'm very appreciative of you doing so, because I think this will do a lot of good.
Right.
Getting your story out.
Well, I also know that you'll get it out. I did this interview a couple times with another channel, and they never put it out. They put it on Daily Motion or somewhere where nobody's going to look. And it needs to get out. It needs to be told. And I know you would do that, Daniel. So
as soon as I'm done with this interview, I am uploading this to the internet, and it will be told. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, all right, Daniel. Thank you.
God bless you and your husband, and we'll continue to keep you in our prayers.
All right. Thank you.
Shalom, shalom.
Bye.